Thanks for coming to the conference. You're looking great. Can you tell me, you started off in the conference talking about what were your biggest achievements regarding Kosovo and your biggest regret. Can you, again for our audience, repeat what are your biggest achievements and regrets regarding Kosovo?
Well, I think that when people ask me what I feel the best about that I did as Secretary of State, I think it's ending ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, because it was something that we had lived with that needed to be stopped, and then ending up in Pristina in the square with all the people cheering and thanking the USA I felt was a great achievement. My biggest regret is that we didn't stay in office long enough to make sure that we would get to the status issues and try to deal with the various aspects of life in Kosovo during the last 7 years.
Are you an optimist after being at this conference that Kosovo can manage the big challenges ahead of statehood and nation building in not only in the first 120 days but further on?
I am an optimist, but I also realize I am a realist in this regard, is that there's a lot to do. It's a very large agenda, and it's going to require the cooperation of everybody, certainly the citizens of Kosovo who will be able to realize their hopes, but everybody. I think it's going to be a big, big agenda, and I think that that's what this conference is showing, is there's a lot of work to do, but a lot of very able people who want to do the work.
Some of the people you've met here you dealt with in 1999. How have they matured in the meantime? Have they? How have they matured?
Well, Hashim Thaçi has some gray hair. But I think that everybody has kind of become, I think, aware of the possibilities of political process, the importance of cooperation, the importance of involving the populations in discussions and decision-making. So I think there have been a lot of positive changes.
You're a key person to help them transform from freedom fighters to negotiators. What is the transformation you think they need now, our leaders?
Well, I think that all leaders have this issue, that they have to know how to govern. And governing is very different than fighting to govern. It requires compromise. It requires understanding what the population needs. It requires transparency and accountability and a lot of hard work, steady hard work.
Now let's talk a little bit about Kosovo Serbs. Some of them, there's a fear that they may start packing their bags when they hear that Kosovo is becoming independent. What do you think Albanian leaders, Kosovo Albanian leaders, the majority, should do to counter-represent the picture that may come out on that D-Days, the so to speak D-Day?
I think it's very important for the Kosovar leaders to make clear that they welcome the presence of the Serbs, that they are a part of a multi-ethnic society. And when I was in Pristina a couple of years ago, I spoke to the Assembly. I made very clear that I thought that minority rights were very important. I was very saddened when I met with some groups of Serbs who all of a sudden were afraid to leave the areas where they live, and that's not what we fought for. That's not what NATO tried to do in ending ethnic cleansing. So I hope that the leaders of Kosovo will understand, in order to have a really functioning, viable state of Kosovo, a new country, that it's important for it to have Serbs and other minorities there, and I hope that it becomes a model multi-ethnic society.
And how could they prevent the exodus of Serbs?
Well, nobody can prevent it, but I think that the way to try not to have it happen is to make clear that there will be minority rights and that the Serbs will be a part of the system, that they will not be viewed as not real citizens. I think that's the really important part. You know, the strength of America is that we have so many different kinds of people who live here, and I think that can also be a strength of Kosovo.
What would you say are the main segments that need immediate attention in post-status days? And one day after independence, what do Kosovars need to focus on?
Well, there are a lot of issues, but I think they need to make clear that they're ready to govern themselves, that they want to support their government and that the government wants to support them, that they feel as though they have status, they then have to begin to work on all the parts that make a real country. Employment, lack of corruption, laws that invite outside investors, education process, the health system. I think that the big challenge for the government as well as the people is that there's so much to do, and there should be a sense of excitement about it and to have full participation.
Talking about the donors, you gave some great ideas today about what could possibly Kosovo be looking at the donors conference. What could we do to attract donors and convince them to give basically the...
Well, I think the thing we began to talk about is that maybe it should be called an economic support conference or economic development or economic opportunity. I think economic opportunity conference, opportunity for the people of Kosovo, and then opportunities for people to support business and development in Kosovo so that it can be a vibrant economy. I think also there needs to be a sense that the minorities gain out of whatever the donors might provide. I think that it should be a little bit different than just governments. I think there should be public-private partnerships and also support for various projects that show the importance of the region. Kosovo has to be part of the whole region.
Can you explain a little bit to us the idea of senators supporting or guaranteeing regarding investment? How does that work in America?
Well, what happens is that we have a part of the government, it's called the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, that actually provides guarantees for loans. That is part of the United States budget, and therefore members of Congress have to support it so that when the budget is voted, they support it. It has to be proposed by the executive branch or proposed by somebody in the Senate, but it shows that there is American governmental backing for loans.
You talked about Constitution as well. Constitution of Kosovo was one of the topics. What do you think Kosovo leaders and basically makers of this Constitution should have in mind when they draft it?
Well, I think they have to have in mind how to fulfill some of the aspects of the Ahtisaari plan, which clearly is a necessity to describe how the government will be set up, the participation of the public, how to make sure that there are minority rights. I keep stressing that because majority rule is fine, but it has to also have minority rights, and that is something that has to be embedded in the Constitution.
Would you yourself basically invest in Kosovo's economy tomorrow? People say it's got, donors are and investors are afraid of its corruption and the fragility of the country. Would you yourself, what would you say to them to convince them that it's worth?
I think it's important to invest in Kosovo, but I also have to say from the other side, it is essential for the new government of Kosovo to, first of all, create investment legislation so that investors don't think that they're just throwing their money away. I think transparency is absolutely essential, and lack of corruption. I think that people are very afraid to invest in some new countries because of the corruption, and frankly, that's something that Kosovo has to work on.
What is the experience of the Albright group's economic dealings in Kosovo? Is it good? Is it bad?
Well, we have been looking, frankly, at some to do with some energy and some to do with telecom. But I think that part of the issue here is what we insist on, and I think we are exemplary in terms of businesses. We insist that everything be legal and transparent and that there not be corruption.
Are you getting that feedback so far?
Sometimes. I think that's part of the issues that people are beginning to look at, is to make sure, and that's why I think we're looking forward in the future that everything is really, the deals that are made are the kind that are really, you can talk to your investors and say, it's safe. It may be risky. All investment is always risky. that's part of what it is.
But realistically, what sort of feedback are you getting from these dealings so far?
Well, some there are good and some are not. I don't want to go into the specifics, but I think that the sense that people have that we always talk about is we want to be involved in various opportunities, but they have to be transparent. There can be no corruption. It has to be accountable.
Finally, you have seen our unity team today and representatives of civil society. Don't you think the number of women is way too low?
Always, but that's true everywhere, I have to tell you. And I think that it would, when, women really make up more than half the population of every country. It's true in Kosovo. And therefore, in order to make a country work, you have to use all the resources you have. And I think societies are much better when women are politically and economically empowered. So I always look for women on delegations. It would be nice to see some, yes.
Secretary Albright, it was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Crampton, can I ask you, why are you in this conference?
Why am I here? I think I'm here to explain what the future role of the ICO might be and what the kind of relationship would be.
So what is the future role in the ICO, and how is it going to differ, basically, the Kosovars' relations to ICO from UNMIC's relations to the Kosovars?
Well, UNMIC, to give it its full title, of course, is the UN Interim Administration Mission for Kosovo. So the key difference between ourselves and UNMIC is that the ICO will not run anything. The second element of that is that because of its administrative role, UNMIC had to be closely involved in almost all aspects of life in Kosovo. The ICO will come under a different umbrella. It has been invited by the negotiating team, the unity team, last year in a letter signed by President Sediu. They've repeatedly expressed willingness to cooperate with the ICO. And the mandate that's given to the ICO is also different. It's about refereeing the fair implementation of a future status settlement and acting as a partner with the government in order to, or the authorities in Kosovo, in order to ensure the implementation of that settlement and to project the Europeanization agenda of Kosovo, to assist in that Europeanization agenda.
So in what moment will you turn from being a partner to the Kosovo government to being the one who runs the show?
Well, I hope never. And in terms of running the show, as I say, the settlement, by my reading at least, doesn't provide for the ICO to run the show at all. I mentioned the role of being a referee, and I think it's a reasonable description.
Then what will you run, if not the show?
Ourselves. The function of the ICO is to oversee the implementation of the settlement, but that implementation is by the Kosovo government. The authorities of Kosovo, the political leaders of Kosovo, they will be responsible, and not only for the implementation of the settlement, for all of the activities of government that normally are carried out by government, for the functioning of healthcare systems, things that are not covered by the settlement. That too will be the exclusive responsibility of the authorities in Kosovo.
One of the concerns that was open in this conference was the concern that the mission that you're planning might have a stronger leadership than basically the fragile institutions of Kosovo, which we know are fragile at this stage. What if you become simply stronger, and if you are stronger than the Kosovo institutions, and will end up doing most things because you would be more effective? What if that happens?
Well, I mean, it's a hypothetical question, so it's pretty difficult to answer, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I think I have to say that concern was not raised with me. In any case, the mandate of the ICO does not allow for the ICO to run. It is not to run the institutions of Kosovo. It is not an administrative mission, and it cannot be an administrative mission.
UNMIC hasn't consulted the civil society enough during the time it was there. How will you change that relationship with civil society?
Part of the thing I think we need to get away from in Kosovo is the idea that the international community is the institution to which Kosovo turns in time of trouble. So if NGOs or the media or individuals have difficulties, it is very natural that in the past they've approached the SRSG. I would hope in the future that they would approach the government and the institutions of Kosovo, because they will have the responsibility for both the implementation of the settlement, but also, as I mentioned earlier, for all of the functions of government. The ICO is there as a monitor. It's there to oversee that implementation of the settlement. But in terms of redress for grievances or a vehicle for addressing concerns raised by civil society, those are properly addressed to the government and institutions of Kosovo.
But what if Kosovo leaders listen more to the international community than they do to their own people?
Well, I hope that we can say that they should listen more to their own people and not so much to us.
Will you continuously say that?
Well, it's not really for me to say. It's for the ICR when he or she is appointed to say. But I would hope yes.
Will you have a code of conduct for internationals that come to be a part of this new mission?
Well, this is an idea that has been raised with us over the last couple of days, and I think it's a very good idea. To be perfectly honest, it's not something that we had really considered before. There's another idea that Behan Saroy raised as well, which is this idea of a compact, as he called it, between the future ICO and the authorities and principal political parties of Kosovo. I think it's an agreement about how the ICO and the ICR, the International Civilian Representative, will interact with the political leaders of Kosovo. An understanding about the nature of the relationship between them. I think it's a very good idea. Is for the ICR himself to agree and negotiate and agree such a compact after his or her appointment. And as for a code of conduct, I think that also is a very good idea. I hope it's something that we can do.
What will happen to a future international officer of your mission if they do something wrong?
It depends what you mean by something wrong.
What I mean by something wrong is something similar to what we've had with a scenario on the last incident that happened in Kosovo, for example. That's on Kosovar's mind. What will happen then? Or will there be, basically, is there immunity around this new in this new mission? What will it differ in that sense from UNMIK?
In that sense, it will, I have to say, differ very little. Yes, there would be immunity. This is where I think a code of conduct is a very good idea, because it holds members of the international community, members of the ICO,
but it doesn't apply to them, no?
To a standard of behaviour which they should adhere to. As for immunity, this is common to all international institutions everywhere. And it would have to be common to the ICO as well.
Why wouldn't something change if we've seen how things happen in the past?
Because frankly, I don't think that the member states are going to second people to a mission in which they don't have that immunity. It's not because this is a blanket way of protecting international personnel from redress if they do wrong. It is a way of ensuring the integrity of international institutions from intrusion by frivolous domestic political activity. To give you an example, outside Kosovo, by the attempt to prosecute, or not prosecute, but to apply domestic law in order to get access to documents which are part of a negotiation with the government, which in any normal circumstance would be protected by conditions of confidentiality.
Okay. Since you have been in Macedonia and seen that transition and Ohrid agreement happen, what is in common and what are the lessons we can take on from that agreement, how it was implemented and has worked, if you agree? What can we take on from that transition there?
Well, I think it's possible to take a very great deal from that, both from the point of view of the Kosovo authorities, but I would also speak from the point of view of the international community. The Ohrid Agreement, I think, is widely and correctly regarded as being a success, both in terms of the negotiation and in terms of the implementation. The interesting thing about it, of course, was that there was no international powers that needed to be used in order to ensure that.
What could you have maximally used in that agreement that you never...
We had a great deal of diplomatic leverage, and we will have the same degree of diplomatic leverage in Kosovo. It's quite difficult to explain what that means, but it's something you know when you see it. And I would hope that we can achieve the same thing in Kosovo. My feeling and the outcome of this conference indicates that there's a great deal of political goodwill to implement the settlement. And if that goodwill continues, and if the implementation of the settlement is smooth, then the powers that are inherent in the mandate of the ICR will never have to be used.
Could you have discharged an official according to the Ohrid agreement then if they didn't accomplish certain things?
No.
No. But you can do that in the Kosovo agreement?
That is the outcome of the negotiations in Vienna, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice trip back to Pristina.
Thank you, and you.